I'm Mike Brilla, host of the Inspired Teacher Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Mitch Weisburgh. Mitch wants to help people live happy and productive lives, and he's written a book to help you do just that. And it's called Mindshifting. Stop your brain from sabotaging your happiness and success. Oh, what a cool book. Awesome information, fun conversation, and so much to learn. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. And oh, by the way, before you go, it'd be so cool if you helped out the podcast. How could you do that? Glad you asked. Here are 3 ways. 1, you could tell a friend and share links. 2, you could go to my website and leave a review and subscribe. And 3, click on the link on my website homepage to buy me a coffee. And by doing this, you could donate $1 or $2 to help me address the costs associated with producing the podcast. That'd be so cool. You are awesome. Enjoy the show.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Milletto. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12. With Dr. Steve Milletto.
Mitch Weisburgh's goal is to grow a critical mass of people who live happy, productive lives, who are resilient and resourceful in the face of obstacles, adversaries, and unintended outcomes. From 1981 through 2000, Mitch founded and ran Personal Computer Learning Centers of America, training adults in the use of computers, growing the company to over 130 employees. Mitch Weisburgh co-founded Academic Business Advisors in 2005, which helped organizations make a difference to reach more students in U.S. schools, and has started various nonprofit organizations in education, such as Games4Ed and Edchat Interactive. Mitch's book, Mindshifting, Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success, came out in December 2024 and focuses on techniques to change from mindsets that hold us back to ones that propel us forward. Since 2018, Mitch has been creating content and teaching mind-shifting and sense-making and has started a mind-shifting community for educators. Mitch writes a newsletter on Substack about ways to inspire the mind to learn. Mitch, thanks so much for being on the show, and say hi to everyone.
Steve, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to talking.
Well, it's awesome to have you here, and let's start by talking about this, because this is really cool. Personal Computer Learning Centers of America. Now, that's cool. What's something you learned about people, computers, and how we think out of that? Because there's got to be some learning that happened there.
Oh, there were so many things. I think one of the things was that in running the company for roughly 20 years and in teaching and in writing courses, there was such a huge difference between the people who were teaching the material and the people who were teaching the people. Because when you're teaching spreadsheets, you teach for a day and then the next day, and you're teaching basically the same material, and you get tired of it pretty quickly. When you're teaching people, you're just interacting with them, and some of the people, they're really struggling, but you can celebrate them when they get something, they're really excited. And some of the people are really flying, and then you could celebrate with them because all of a sudden they're tackling really difficult, intricate problems. So I think one of the things that I found is that if you're in a teaching position and you're primarily teaching the people, it's always interesting and it's always motivating.
Nice. I love that. In 1981, I learned a very valuable lesson. I was I had a math teacher who also did computers and stuff, and he gave extra credit if you went to his after school or during lunch, and he had all these magazines that what he wanted you to do was go in there and start putting in these games that you input into the memory of the computer from these magazines. And I learned this thing called save that I should have done the first time I did all that.
Oh, yes, yeah. Right. Well, it's as you're saying that was one of the earliest things that we did, because now you're working on a spreadsheet and it's automatically saving, but back in the day you worked and it was in the main memory of the computer, but it wasn't saved. And we would work on the very first problem. Let's say in the spreadsheet was called VisiCalc in those days. So we would work on the very first problem, and it's something that if you or I were doing on a spreadsheet today, it might take us a minute and a half, but it took 20 minutes for people to do their first time through under instructions. And then I would say, okay, now click, it's not click because there weren't mouses. It's just, type slash close. Okay. And then I'm like, oh, you know something? I want one more change to the spreadsheet. Can you and somebody would say, it's gone. Where do we find it? You didn't save it, and that's how I taught them the importance of saving. And then I would kind of back up and say, look, I was just kidding about doing something but I wanted to do that deliberately to explain to you the importance of saving. And in the next spreadsheet, we're going to start it and you're going to save it every 5 minutes. And and you'll get into the habit of doing that.
So awesome. That's it's a heck of a lesson to learn, though. I got to tell you,
and it's better to learn it in a class than when you've been working on a budget for 5 hours. And then, somebody turns off the computer or something and you're just lost, right?
That would be bad. Yes, that would be very bad. Oh, yeah. So, Mitch, our focus today is your book, Mindshifting, Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success. So what's mindshifting?
So mindshifting is to be able, and you brought it up in the intro also, mindshifting is the ability to be able to recognize when you're in a mindset that's not allowing you to do what you want to do. And so your mindset is holding you back. And there's really 3 different components to mindshifting. One is resourcefulness, 2 is resilience, and 3 is collaboration. And if you want, I can go into each one. It's up to you.
Yeah, let's do that. That sounds good.
Okay, so resourcefulness is to be able to tap into the parts of your mind that are capable of critical thinking, creativity, executive function, and those really reside in your prefrontal cortex. Generally, what happens is when we react to events, we're reacting just like really any other animal from our more primitive parts of the mind. And very often when our actions get challenged at all, we go into like fight or flight. Why did you do that? I did it because it was the right thing to do. And those are the types of things that hold us back. But when we ourselves are capable of self-awareness, of saying, something, this is the limbic part of my mind that's doing that. And then when we can calm those parts of the mind, and then when we can tap into our abilities to be creative, exploratory, have a sense of play as we're doing things, we become more powerful. And everybody has those capabilities. It just has to be trained. And, again, one of my purposes is to be able to reach the next generation and teach them how to do that. That resourcefulness is really the subject of the book, Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success. That's on the resourcefulness part. And then the resilience part is to be able to come back from situations that didn't turn out the way we expected. And if you really think about it, when we go in and we see a problem, we see an opportunity, and we come up with, this is what I have to do. And then people say, well, wait a minute, what about this? And it's like, no, this, I know the right thing. Anybody else who comes up with anything is wrong. I'm going to do this, and it's going to solve the problem. And then, if you think about the big problems that we face, never is the first thing that we do ever the thing that's going to solve the problem. But then what do? It's like we were so sure we were going to solve the problem. We did it. It made the problem worse, or it didn't make the problem better, and we shift into blame mode. And resilience is the ability of being able to go into a situation understanding that the first thing we do is probably not going to solve the issue, but it's going to give us some feedback that we can use to adjust and do the next thing. So we're not judging the information that's coming back as failing or success. We're using the information that comes back in order to change and in order to improve. And actually, when you have that attitude towards things, this whole idea of having grit and persistence kind of melts away, because you're not expecting that, oh my gosh, I'm going to succeed. Oh, I failed. Oh, but if I had any backbone, I'd really be able to come back from this. That all goes away because it's like, okay, I'm going to try something just like a game, and I'm going to get some feedback, and it's going to tell me what to do next. And then I'm going to evaluate, and then I'm going to do next. And that's resilience. And there's I have a course on resilience. I don't have a book on resilience yet. And the third part is the collaboration part. And in the collaboration part, there's almost nothing that we do that doesn't involve other people. And sometimes those people get in our way. Probably not with you, right? Nobody ever gets in your way, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever had anybody who disagreed with you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Ever had somebody who really opposed you?
Yes.
Okay. And then some people, that you just don't like, and our standard ways of dealing with those things, when we really think about them, they just don't work. Or maybe they work short terms, like rewards and punishments. Daniel Pink talks about it. A lot of people talk about it. Those may have some short-term benefit. If we needed somebody to do something, we could punish them or we could offer them a reward and they might do it. But long-term, those really destroy our intrinsic motivation. Long-term, if we're going to have a relationship with these people, we can't influence them by giving them facts or reasons or logic or rewards or punishments. We have to work with them so that we're moving together in order to accomplish whatever it is that we want to do. And there's actually, 60, 70 years worth of research on how to do that, but somehow or other, most of that research hasn't filtered down to most of us. So with the collaboration material, it's how do you recognize when you're in a situation where somebody might object to it or somebody might get in your way? How do you then calm yourself so that you're in a resourceful mode? And then how do you establish a connection with them so that you can jointly move forward? And a lot of that is based on motivational interviewing or nonviolent communication or a few other methodologies that are used in order to move forward with people. And in that one, again, there's a course, and that book's going to be out in, say, September, October. I finished the second draft of that book now.
Nice. Congrats on that. Almost around.
Oh, thank you.
Just around the corner.
Yeah.
So cool. All right. So I have to ask you this because, one of the things that's very interesting about all of this period is just like when you asked me, have you ever had somebody disagree with you, or have you ever had somebody kind of get in your way? Yeah. To me, you can't really go through life.
Even sometimes, I'll bet you every once in a while your wife has disagreed with you.
Oh yeah, that's we had one of those just last night. So yeah, and and I know that sometimes depending on the situation. Now, by the way, I'm no longer talking about my wife if she's listening. Okay. All right, so
yeah, my wife is an angel. So.
Nice, there you go. Mine is too. So we're good. But what we're talking about here is that sometimes just something like that, an interaction that just throws you, a curveball or whatever, can easily just. And I know that as we went through this, that it could just shut you down. You're just kind of like, why am I doing this? What's this worth? Is it really worth me pushing through this or trying to come out with another answer? And what that leads me to is in your title you have this stop your brain from sabotaging, and I gotta go there because
right.
Let's talk about self-sabotaging thoughts. I mean, why do we do that? Why do we have them?
Well, there's so many different types of self-sabotaging thoughts. Okay, so I'm going to go to probably the one that psychologists spend the most time with, and a lot of psychologists call this your part X or your saboteurs, and these are the parts of you that are really trying to protect you. They're trying to protect you by keeping you in the status quo and giving you the feeling that if you don't change or you don't try or you don't do this, that you're going to be safe. And then you have the regrets, or you have the feeling of victimhood or blame that comes with not doing something. And the first tool to stop that is really self-awareness, is to be able to say, my gosh, this is my part X that is doing this to me. It's trying to protect me, but I don't think that that's helpful. So the first part is being self-aware. The second part might be saying to yourself some positive self-chatter, which is, it's done this to me before, but I've succeeded and I've gone ahead before and I can do it again. So something, Mr. Part X or Miss Part X, you can just quiet and I'm going to go ahead anyhow. And there's like 1,500 different things that you can say to yourself. So positive self-chatter very often in the form of a question to yourself, is the second method of quieting down. And the third is some type of distraction, because very often if we can move our mind to think about something else, that part of the mind will quiet down. And so mindfulness or meditation or exercise or doing some art or singing or listening to music for the purpose of just enjoying the music, taking a walk in nature, some combination of those three things are the three ways that we can then get ourselves out of that survival part X type mode and into something that's creative. And then I'll just say that sometimes we realize that we're not capable of doing that. And this happened to me a couple of weeks ago, that I was so angry at somebody. And yes, this is just my survival parts of my system that are making me angry. I can overcome this. Well, no, I couldn't overcome it. Well, let me do mindfulness for 15 minutes. It's like, I'm still angry. And so in that case, what I did is I called my son, and I'm like, his name is Herbie. And I said, Herbie, like this and this happened, and I'm so angry, and I just can't get out of it. And he's like, Dad, you wrote the book on it. Can't you use something from the book? He says, I'll tell you what, I'll use something from the book. And he just, opened the book, turned to a page, and, but I needed somebody else to do that to me. Yeah. I couldn't do that for myself.
Understand.
So those are really the four different ways is, first, of being self-aware, and sometimes that's enough. Positive chatter, sometimes that's enough. Some type of distraction like mindfulness, sometimes that's, and if that's not enough, then you probably need somebody outside, maybe a therapist, maybe a friend, maybe an adult child or a parent or a spouse.
That's awesome. I understand what you mean there, because even though I haven't written the book, sometimes you just need someone to say, you talk about things like this. Okay, so now it's time to take your medicine, all right?
Right, yeah. Yep.
I like that. That's, it is funny, because I've had my share of these moments where you're like, what the heck? And I'm just going to use a simple one, because one of the simplest, I like to go to estate sales and garage sales and stuff like this, and I like to try and find record albums, all right? And for those of you who don't know what an LP is or a record album, please look it up today, because they're awesome. All right, but I'm not trying to collect them for value. I like certain types of music, lots of different types of music, and it's cool to have it on an LP and to be able to play it, and you get this nice sound, and you get to listen to the different tracks and stuff like this, and I like that. And especially I go back into the 40s and 50s and 60s. There's some trumpet players that I just love. Out the wazoo, and it's good stuff. Well, one of the problems is that when you go to estate sales and garage sales, it's not going to be there next week.
Right.
And so part of my brain goes, all right, so I'm only going to I think I'm going to buy these two right here, but there's another part of my brain going, yeah, but what about this one? This one over here,
right?
This one's really got your name on it, and you should think about this one. But I think I'll spend just on these two right here, and then I'm going to hate myself later, because later that voice is going to, I told you to buy it, and you didn't buy it.
Well, and that's part X, because it doesn't matter what your decision was or what you did. It would criticize you. And one of the things I talk about in the book is this friend of mine who's a grief counselor. Okay. And she was in a support group with two other grief counselors, and she'd been in that group for a year or two. And the first year was great, but it started not to do too much. And so here's how she thought about the different things that she could do. And there's basically three. One is she could continue in the group. Two, she could talk to the other members of the group about what she was feeling. And three, she could end it. Okay. And so when she talked about ending it, her part X, and says to her, this is why you'll never succeed in life, because every time you do something, you give up, you never follow through. It's just like, I'm disgusted at you. How could you even like yourself? You're always like this. And then she's like, okay, all right. Well, then I guess I'll just stick it out. And then it's like, that's so much like you. You're always doing that. You're just putting up with things. It's not going to work out. You can't make a decision. It's just like, that's why you're never going to succeed in life. And all the same things, it's just coming at her for that. And then when she's like, well, then I'll talk about it with people. And it's just like, yeah. That's just like you. You never make your own decisions. You're always relying on everybody else. And there's only, she basically had three options. And whichever option she was, that part X was going to yell at her. And that's basically what happens with you. What she did is she went and she says, something, I realize this is my part X. Let me just calm myself down. And then what do I really want to do? And then after she came up with what she really wanted to do, and she started doing that, her part X started criticizing her again. And at that point, she's like, hey, you know something? Thank you very much, part X. I don't need you. Stop bothering me. And she just continued because she grounded herself first. And you could probably do that with the records. You're going to go to a record store. You come up with like, what do I really want to do here? Do I want to buy everything that's great? Do I want to buy two? Do I want to limit myself? What do I want to do? And as soon as you're there and you start getting the hunkering to do whatever else and your part X that's bothering you, it's like, no, I already decided this. You can go to sleep. I'm okay.
I like that. That's good because that's and I know it's definitely a little more less important when compared to someone's part X that's telling them that they're terrible. And
right, yeah.
But it's at the same time, it appears in different ways. And it's like, and you're right. It's just like, if I bought the thing, then later I'd be going, dadgummit, I bought that and I probably should have saved that money. And, it's like, stop. Right?
Yep.
So this is so important because it's like, I think sometimes we don't realize how much we do self-sabotage ourselves. That we're listening to these different voices and such that, and I don't mean that to sound bad. I mean, but I think we get stuck in that world.
Well, the parts of the brain that are more primitive, that are making decisions, we call those the limbic parts of the brain. And I'll say there's 5 different ways that part of the brain chooses to do things. And that part of the brain, as soon as there's some external stimulus, like you see a record album or you see a stop sign or something, that part of the brain reacts in like 2/100ths of a second because it's concerned primarily with survival. And the 5 things that it does is, you can freeze, you can fight, you can, flight, run away. You can do something that you really don't have to think about, something from habit or something you're fluent in, or you can look around and you can copy what everybody else is doing. And generally, those parts of the brain make a decision to do one of those things in less than a second. Your parts of the brain that are creative, critical thinking, executive function, empathetic, those operate out of your cortex or your prefrontal cortex. And that part of the brain wakes up 2 to 3 seconds after a stimulus. So that's a lot longer. If it's waking up in 2 seconds and your limbic parts of the brain have already made a decision in a second, that part of the brain naturally gravitates towards, gee, I made a decision to do this. What's the reason? And it starts justifying.
Nice.
And so, if you can come back and say, well, wait a minute, my limbic parts of the brain made the decision. I don't have to do that. And so you can then go to those 4 methods from before to reset. But naturally, subconsciously, your decisions are being made by your more primitive parts of the brain and being justified by your higher level cognitive functions.
That's so powerful, and I appreciate you talking about this. What a cool book you've got. Because this is, I think we don't really realize how often we self-sabotage or throw ourselves in front of the pits of whatever.
Right. Yep.
Because we're listening to that instead of thinking about why we made the choices or getting control to say, hey, I'm okay. All right. And I like this. We get, who are you writing for? Who's your audience? Who's that? Who should read your book?
Well, my goal is I'd like to reach, not me personally, but I'd like, 5 million people. And that's an arbitrary number. There's 8 billion people on the planet. So it just seems to me like if 5 million people really knew how to think this way, then we would really start solving all these issues that we're dumping on ourselves. And um, if we could get the next generation to think that way, just imagine they're going to grow up and they're going to be able to be resourceful, resilient. They're going to live happier lives. And so first, my first audience is, okay, somehow or other I want 5 million people to be able to do this. Second, this next generation, I want them to be able to grow up and live great lives. But knowing that I'm not going to be the one to be able to reach all kids, my next audience is teachers and parents. And if teachers learn these techniques, A, they're going to be happier and they're going to live better lives. B, they're going to use them as part of their teaching, so they'll be more effective teaching. And C, they're going to be teaching and modeling for the kids how to do this. And it's part of co-regulating. They're going to be training kids to think this way. So my third audience is the teachers. And then we all know in the teaching profession, teachers get leaned on for so many different things that my other audience is, say, administrators and policymakers, to give teachers the bandwidth to be able to take these. Like, for example, if teachers know that they have to receive 10, 15 credit hours, of professional development for a year, if a state makes the course available to those teachers, then the teachers then the teachers have a reason for taking the course. So those are my prime audiences. The book is much more general than education. So an entrepreneur, a parent, a person who's frustrated in their job, any of them could read the book and get like 50 different techniques of how to reset their mind.
Love it. Love it. All right. So help us, let's take a look at this. Can you talk us through a technique that might help someone who's got some challenge happening, but to stop thinking of it as a challenge and instead think of it as an opportunity? And you just named a couple of different areas in our world where you run into that all the time. From we started with education, but business and just anything out there that you. I can think of that where you're trying to create something out of nothing. I would think you see that.
So understand that not every technique works for everybody. And even if a technique works for you once, that doesn't mean that it's going to work for you in a different type of a situation. Having said that, and knowing that there's 50 different techniques that are in the book, one of the simplest techniques is the perhaps I can technique. And so in that, and it helps to have another person asking you the questions. So let's say if let's say I'm the one who's asking you the questions. It's like, well, first, think of something that you really want to do that you can't do. And can you think of something? Is there something that's like bothering you or that's there? And can you think of one?
Okay. Yes. I mean, I've had several starts at doing this, and I really want to push through and accomplish this. And what this is I really want to write a book.
Okay. All right. And so when you think I want to write a book, is it like that there's some voice in your head that says, I can't do this?
Yes, and it appears once I start working on it.
Right? Okay. So once that voice appears, you're basically sunk. You don't have access to your abilities to write the book. And if somebody were to say to you, yes, you can write the book, then it's like that then forces you into, wait a minute, I just said I couldn't write the book, right? It's like you're going to be arguing with them. Another way of thinking about it is, you think about writing the book, you hear that voice say, I can't write a book. And you just respond to that voice also internally saying, perhaps I can. So this time, think about writing the book. And when you hear that voice saying, I can't write a book, just respond like, perhaps I can. And when you say, perhaps I can, what happens?
Well, I kind of get an extra little charge to try it again, I guess.
And do what? How would you try it again?
So one of my techniques has been to put myself in a different place. So like at a fast food restaurant and sitting in the corner with my laptop and where I can't get up and fiddle with things. It's if I do, I'm probably going to leave. It's like, so trying to change my setting so that it
So
makes
that would
me
be one
stay.
thing. What's another thing that you could possibly do?
Well, I mean, what I've attempted to do is to just write. I mean, I just sit there and I'm using, whether it's pencil and paper or whether it's the computer, to just try and knock out some thoughts about what's in my head.
And let's just, and it doesn't matter which of the techniques, but one of them, let's say you started to sit down and write, and when the urge comes to not write, what could you possibly say to yourself that would allow you to continue to write? Like maybe, something, let me just give this 15 minutes or maybe a half an hour, what could you possibly say to yourself at that point and prepare yourself for it? Because it's going to come up that your brain is going to start saying, but let's prepare your brain for that. So what could you say to yourself to continue it?
Well, I think I could say, all right, 15 more minutes. Let's see, if I get 250 words done in 15 minutes, then I'm going to extend it another 15 minutes.
Okay. So we can stop there, but coming up with those two possible techniques, one to go to a place where it's more difficult to leave, and one to just sit down and start writing and being able to come back to that voice in your head. You always had that ability to come up with those things in your prefrontal cortex. But those methods were closed off from you because your limbic parts of your brain had said, I can't do it. And perhaps I can. It didn't negate that. It just opened up. And your prefrontal cortex at that point couldn't help but come up with one or more than one way of possibly doing it. Maybe not right now, but maybe in the future. Now, I can't predict whether you will or you won't write a book, but this opened up possibilities. And that's the key to this technique, is to open up the possibilities so that you can come up with something that you can try that'll start moving you in that direction.
That's awesome.
So it's when you do that with other people, the idea is to get them to say, perhaps I can, to themselves. Because if I had said, perhaps you could, to you, there's a possibility that it would have worked, but it's a lot less of a possibility than if you say it to yourself. So if you're going to coach somebody else through it, it's to coach them to say, perhaps I can, to themselves. And I'll tell you, one of the earliest times I tried this was with a woman who's a friend of mine, who 12 years before she'd started her PhD and just could never get started on it again. And after trying that technique, like a day or two later, she was able to call the university and re-enroll in the PhD program. And now, a year and a half, well, actually, so I guess I've been using this for a while because it's only a year and a half or 2 years later, but she's now just like 6 months away from getting her PhD. It was really cool.
Nice. That's awesome, because I do know that feeling. The professor looks at you and goes, all right, are you going to get this dissertation done this century or not?
Right. And that was, in 1999, you could kind of laugh at it, but in, 2025, it's like, this century, I'm not even going to be around.
Yeah, exactly. Jeez. That's good stuff, because that dissertation world is a whole nother planet there too. And that's one of those things that I've experienced, that where I've made every excuse under the sun about why I'm not sitting down and working on on what I'm supposed to be working on. So although there is a floor at the University of Georgia Library that I'm pretty sure they should name after me, because I did a lot of sitting there. Yes.
Well, we're all human, right? We all have these things.
Exactly. I love this. Mitch, we're getting close to finishing up. Before we go there, where can our listeners find additional information, connect, and learn more?
I think the easiest place is, I have a website called mindshiftingwithmitch.com. And if they go there, they can find out about the book. They can find out about the courses. They could, if they're interested in having me or somebody else come and speak to an organization, they can find out about that. And then there's a link to my newsletter, which I have on Substack. So you could go to M. Weisburgh, but my name is spelled really weirdly, but mweisburgh.substack.com. But if you just go to mindshiftingwithmitch.com, there's a link to the Substack, and you can get the newsletter if you're interested.
Awesome. And I'll put links in my show notes to your website and to everything, so they can easily find that. Good stuff. So I got one last question for you, and it goes like this. If you had the chance to talk with an audience of teachers about mind shifting, what is a takeaway that you would want them thinking about as they left your talk?
I think that if I were talking with teachers, it's not so much about mind shifting. It's like the kids aren't really going to learn unless you're having fun. So as a teacher, I know there's all this stuff that's going on, but take a moment and find out for yourself how you're going to enjoy what you're doing. And if you're enjoying what you're doing, then the teaching and everything else is just going to follow that. And you got into education because you love the kids. You tap into that again and have fun what you're doing, because what you're doing is really, really important, and we really need it.
I love that. That is awesome. That is very cool. Mitch, thank you so much for talking with us about your book, Mind Shifting, Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success. Awesome information, excellent conversation, so much to learn and overcome our own negative talk. Wishing you the best in all you do.
Well, thank you, Steve. It was a pleasure talking with you. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for bringing really good information out for educators.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching Learning Leading K12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice-Ed Radio. Voice-Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching Learning Leading K12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.